It's a great honor to talk to some amazing entrepreneurs with new skin. And just a shout out to Lizzie Brown. Your influence to help create leaders is amazing. And of course, your sister, Lauren Mingy, is one of my favorite people in the entire world. And so it is my pleasure and my honor to talk to you about increasing your leadership capacity. What does capacity mean? You know it, but let's go ahead and define it. Capacity is really simply what you can handle or what you can produce. But as leaders, we have to continue to work to increase our capacity, or we will become the lid to the organization or the lid to production. And what we have to recognize is that whatever it is that got us here won't get you there. If we continue to do what we've always done, we'll continue to get what we've always got. If we think the same way, we'll tend to get the similar results. And some of you right now, very likely because you've had real success, you might be hitting what I call a leadership lid, meaning you grew in your production, you grew in your sales, you grew in your leadership, and now you feel like you're kind of leveling off. You might be hitting a leadership lid, and at some point, we can't continue doing the same things or thinking in the same way, or we'll keep getting the results that we got. What got us here won't get us there. And so what I want to do is talk to you about increasing your capacity. If you want to increase what you do, if you want to increase who you influence, if you want to increase what you produce, you have to increase your capacity. And I'll tell you a quick story and then introduce what I call the 3 C's of increasing your capacity. The story is this. We have 6 kids, and we would take them every year to this family camp where basically we'd all 8 of us would be together and do things. And I was at the pool with several of my kids and met a guy that ended up becoming a really good friend. And I didn't know his backstory, but he kind of wandered up and just struck up a conversation. And then he said, "I bet you can't hold your breath underwater for a minute." And you know how guys are. If someone dares you, we're going to do it. And so I said, "Let's go, let's try." And so he had his little watch on, and he counted to 3, and I went underwater. And I could hear him above the water telling me how much time I had, and I just knew I was going to stay under for a minute. So at about 30 seconds, I thought it was pretty easy. At about 40, it got harder. At about 50, I thought I may not make it 10 more seconds, and I felt my lungs contract, and I stayed under. And he said a minute. I came out. I was like, "Yeah, I did a minute." And this guy who I had just met looked at me and he said, "That was pretty good for your first try." He said, "This time, we're going to over double your time underwater." And I thought, "Who are you? And you're crazy. Like, there's no way." I almost died. In 60 seconds, there's no way we're going to double the time. Well, come to find out, this guy, his name was Mark Button. He's the guy who created the Vortex football and the Koosh ball, sold his company, and he ended up training entrepreneurs and CEOs to grow in their capacity. And this was an example he would take them through to help them see that there was more in them. He took me through this exercise and gave me a bunch of things to do and not do. He said, before you go underwater, you're going to breathe in as much oxygen as you can and then exhale, and you're going to do this 4 times. You're increasing the size of your lungs by stretching it out some so you can hold more oxygen. Then he went through all these different things. He said, when you go underwater, don't move, conserve your energy, listen to what he says. At some point he said, you're going to feel your lungs contract, which I did. He said, that's just your body telling you you need oxygen. He said, but don't panic. I'll never will forget, he said, your mind doesn't understand what your body is capable of. Your mind doesn't understand what your body's capable of. He said, when that happens, just exhale a little bit of oxygen. It's going to trick your mind into relaxing, and there's a lot more in you. And then when you panic and you can't do any more, open up your eyes and look for something floating that again distracts your mind and such. And so he said, we're going to double your time. I thought it was impossible, but I did everything he said. I went underwater and followed kind of his regimen. And the whole time he'd tell me, you're at 30 seconds, you're at 40 seconds, you're at 50 seconds. What I didn't know is that Mark was lying to me. When he told me I was at 30, I was already at about 38 seconds. But I didn't know. When he told me I was at 50, I had already passed a minute, but I didn't know. He was tricking me because my mind doesn't know what my body's capable of. I went through the whole ordeal, felt my lungs contract, blew out, all this kind of stuff. The first time I barely did 1 minute. The second time I did 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Almost tripled what was the very max that I thought was possible because my mind did not know what my body was capable of. What I want to say to you in your life and in your leadership, that you are capable of reaching more, producing more, doing more, selling more, impacting more than you realize. But in order to do it, you're gonna have to grow in your capacity. I've got a longer teaching I do on this. I'm gonna keep it real short just for the sake of time and narrow down to what I call today the 3 C's. I've actually got 5, there's 2 bonus ones, but you don't get those today. I'm gonna give you 3 C's of increasing your capacity. And your assignment is going to be choose one. Which one of these do you wanna work on? If you try to work on 3 things or 5 things, you're not likely gonna grow anywhere. So I always try to narrow it down to one. Which one will you work on? And here's the C's. There's confidence, there's connections, and there's commitment. What I want you to do is I want you to build your confidence. That's the first C. The second thing we're gonna talk about is if you wanna grow in your capacity, we're gonna expand your connections and we're gonna increase your commitment. Which one? Do you need to build your confidence? Do you need to expand your connections, or do you need to increase your commitment? Let's start with confidence. Some of you need to build your confidence. Almost all of us in leadership, at some point we do need to. This is very, very true for me. As a communicator in the early years, when I would go to communicate, I would vomit. I would be so nervous. I would throw up in a bucket. And so I had to grow in my confidence. Today, I always joke that I don't throw up in a bucket. I just throw up in my mouth. I swallow it and we're good to go, right? Kind of gross, but that's the way it is. So here's what I know about you. Chances are, even though many of you have had some success, you still feel like a pretender. You still feel like a pretender. For me, I was 19 when I purchased my first rental home. When I graduated from college, I had 4. I was a full-blown landlord. But in my mind, I felt like a pretender. I felt like a little kid, didn't know what I was doing. I was a pretend landlord. Then I went into ministry shortly after college, and they said I was a pastor, but I felt way too young. I felt like a pretend pastor. Then at the age of 23, I married my best friend Amy, and we felt like we were playing house. We felt like we were pretending marriage. Here's what I'm gonna guess about some of you. You still feel like a pretend entrepreneur. You haven't accepted and grown in your confidence that you are an entrepreneur. You are absolutely and completely a leader. You have what you need to do what you're called to do. And we see it a lot of times when I call the language of the lid. And you may say it out loud, or you may think it internally, but you may think I'm not good enough, or I've got them all fooled, or I can't do any more, or there's not enough hours in the day. And if you find yourself saying some of those things, you're talking yourself out of the capacity that's really in you. And what I would encourage you to do is change your self-talk. Change what you say to yourself. As one who is someone who believes in God, there's a scripture that says that you have everything you need for life and godliness. That God's not sitting there going, I'm gonna keep something from you so you can't do my will. I wanna say to you as a spiritual entrepreneur, you have everything you need to do everything you're supposed to do. And you wanna change your self-talk to believe that I am a leader. I am capable. I can produce more. I can impact more. I can increase my sales. You change your self-talk over and over and over again. You're creating new neural pathways which increase your confidence. And here's what I know about you is there might be some fear that's holding you back. You may think, well, I'm too young, or I don't have enough experience, or I've got kids at home and it's really, really hard to do this, or whatever. And I always tell our leaders that your path to your greatest potential is straight through your greatest fear. Let me say it one more time. The path to your greatest potential is straight through your greatest fear. If there's some fear, some internal insecurity holding you back, step through it. I told you that I used to get nervous communicating. I still do. If you ever are at a place and watch me communicate, what I do before I start is I take one big step forward. What I'm doing in my mind is I'm stepping out of my fears. I'm stepping out of my self-doubt. I'm stepping out of my insecurities, and I'm stepping into the confidence of my calling. Some of you, what you need to do is, it's one step forward. It's build your confidence. I have everything I need to do everything I'm called to do. Change your self-talk. Create new neural pathways of confidence. You have what it takes. For some of you, in order to grow, you got to believe it. If you don't believe it's possible, you're going to prove it's not. You have to create that confidence, change your self-talk. If that's your one, you don't have to listen to anything else. That's your one. Don't talk yourself out of the success that God has for you. Number one, if you want to grow in your capacity, you got to build your confidence. Number two, for some of you, you need to expand your connections. This is ridiculously important. I could talk for hours about this. People have said, show me who you listen to, and I'll show you who you're becoming. Or they say, show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. Or they say, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And all of those things in one way or another are true. Who you're around shapes who you become. If you want to do more, get around people who do more. If you want to think bigger, get around people that think bigger. A lot of people, they're not 5 times smarter than you, they just think 5 times bigger than you. You want to get around big thinkers. And what I've determined, and I want to say this is really true, and you may even want to jot this down. Some of you, you may be one relationship away from changing the course of your destiny. One relationship. You may be one relationship away from changing the course of your leadership. You may be one relationship away from changing the impact of a ministry or the production in your sales. And I'll give you an example. It was a total and complete game changer. I was about 30 years of age as a pastor or so, and this was back in the late 1990s. Back then, churches typically had one Sunday service, sometimes 2, rarely 2, never 3. Back then, I didn't know of a single church that had 3 services. It just wasn't something they did. Well, our little church, we were meeting in a little bicycle factory, and we had grown from 2 services to 3, and I wanted to go to 4 services. Well, all the people over me said, you can't do that, that's too many. No one can do 4 services, churches shouldn't be in 4 services, blah, 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 blah. Well, I got snowed in an airport after being at a little meeting with this older guy who was 78 years of age at the time. His name was Lyle Schaller, and he was brilliant. He was one of the most brilliant leadership and church consultants alive. He was so brilliant that a lot of times people said he was wrong, and then 5 years later they'd realize he was right. Well, I was there with Lyle, and I said, hey, Lyle, I want to go to 4 services in church. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And he looked at me, he's a little man, 78 years old, looked at me, I was about 30, and he said, that's the problem with you young guys. You all think too small. Lyle said, you shouldn't be thinking 3 or 4. You shouldn't be thinking 5 or 6. He said, you should be thinking 7 services at your first location, and then 7 at your second, and then 7 at your third. And he said, you won't know what you're doing until you get to 5, but if you can do 5, one day you can do 50. Okay. At that time, there weren't churches that met in multiple locations. There weren't churches that had 4 services, much less 7. But that one relationship, and Lyle became a friend that mentored me for years, it changed the course of my destiny. As of today, we're at 43 locations. More locations than any other church in the country. Lyle was right. If you could do 5, one day you could do 50. One day we will do 50. In the upcoming years, we actually went to 8 services at locations, and then one day 9. I called Lyle before he died. He died at the age of 92. I called Lyle and said, hey, Lyle, we have 9 services at some locations. You told me 7. He goes, oh my gosh, I never thought that was possible. I thought 7 was the most that was possible. I can't believe you're doing 8 and 9. I said, that's the problem with you old guys, is you think too small. Some of you right now, you're thinking too small. And if you get around bigger thinkers, bigger producers, people with more capacity, they'll tend to stretch your capacity. If you're stuck, here's what I encourage you to do. Find someone several steps ahead of you and learn from them, not 1 or 2 steps. If you just find someone 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, you're going to see tweaks. If you find someone that's 10 steps ahead of you, they're going to give you what I call the gift of disorientation. Your mind's going to be blown. Like, how do they do all that? And then what I want to encourage you to do is don't copy what they do, because you're not who they are. Don't copy what they do. Learn how they think. Learn who influences them. Learn what they read. Learn how they process. Try to get inside their mind. And here's a really important thing is when you're around people that are way ahead of you, watch for wherever you push back the strongest. Wherever you say, oh, well, that's just them, or oh, that's just their part of the country, or that's just in their industry. Wherever you push back the hardest is often a reflection of the place where you have the most to learn. Get around people that are doing more and watch as the right people can take you to new places. You want to expand your capacity. There's three things. Which one are you going to work on? Maybe you need to grow in your confidence. Some of you, it's connections. You're the average of the people you spend the most time with. If you feel stuck, maybe you need to be around some new people. Expand your connections. Some of you, that's yours. And the third thing I want to talk about is just increasing your commitment. Bring all of you. Around here with our leaders, we tell them all the time, don't you dare try. Stop trying. Stop trying. Why are you not growing? Because you're trying. Stop trying. Don't try. Stop trying and start training. Think about this. You may say, well, like I'm trying to do more. Anytime you try, that gives you an excuse to stop trying. I'm just trying to get better. The difference between trying is an attempt. Training, though, is a commitment. And it's a commitment not to try to be something you're not. It's training to become more of what you already are. And this is amazing. I started taking flying lessons, and I remember early on going, well, I'm trying to be a pilot. Listen, I'm not trying to be a pilot right now. I am a pilot. I have my pilot's license, and right now I'm studying to get my instrument rating. I am training to get my instrument rating. I'm training, I'm growing in it. Why? Because I'm a pilot and I'm training to become more and better of what I already am. So don't try, train. I'm training to be a leader, and be really specific. And it doesn't even have to be with Nu Skin. It could be that you want to get out of debt. So I'm not trying to get out of debt. I'm in training. I'm taking Dave Ramsey's class. I got his face tattooed on my arm. I got Gazelle Intensity, like we're paying off debt, whatever it is. Or I'm not trying to have a good marriage. Just see yourself as we are a great marriage in training. We're not there yet, but we're working toward it. Or you might say, I've been trying to get in shape. Just stop trying to get in shape. Bring the very best of you. I'm training. So that means as one who's in training, I've got the right diet, I've got the right sleep, I've got the right exercise. I'm in training. The same with your leadership. What is your mission? I'm not trying to be a better leader. I am training. Your mission to be a global force for good, empowering people to improve lives with innovative products, with rewarding opportunities, and with enriching culture. That is a good mission, and I applaud you for it. How much you want something determines what you'll do to get it. Raise your commitment. I'm not saying, hey, you can be an incredible entrepreneur and a great mom. You can be the best of best leaders and grow, and you can get out of debt and sell more. How much you want something will determine what you'll do to get it. Some of you have been trying. It's time to train. It's time to increase your commitment. So the question is, which one is yours? Which one? If you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. But we want to grow on our capacity. Is it build your confidence? Is it increase your connections? Is it increase your commitment? Expand your connection, which one is it? And what I want to do is I want to tell you the same thing that Mark Button told me, is that there's more in you. There's way more in you. Who are you? You're not just a pretend entrepreneur. You're not just a wannabe leader. You're not just trying to be a good mom, or trying to be a good wife, or trying to be good at Nu Skin. You are a leader. You have everything you need to do everything that you're supposed to do. See yourself in it. Embrace that confidence. Surround yourself with the best people and bring your best every day. And you can go from a minute to 2 minutes and 45 seconds and way, way more, because your mind doesn't know what your body's capable of. I believe in you. You believe in you. God believes in you. Now get out there and do something special.